The sound of ripping paper echoed through the bank lobby as Marcus watched his future, his son's future, torn to shreds before his eyes. In that moment, he felt his world collapse. But what happened next would change everything. If you're enjoying this incredible true story of prejudice, redemption, and life-changing fortune, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more amazing real-life stories that will leave you speechless. Marcus Jenkins clutched his sleeping 5-year-old son Elijah closer to his chest as he stood in line at First National Bank. The weight of the child was nothing compared to the burden of responsibility he'd carried since his wife Sarah's death 18 months ago. His arms ached from holding Elijah, who had finally fallen asleep after a night of fever and coughing, but Marcus couldn't put him down. The daycare had called him at work, again, and he'd had to leave early, forfeiting precious hours of pay at the construction site. But none of that mattered now. Not with what he held in his pocket. When Marcus finally reached the front of the line, he was directed to Patricia Winter's desk. The bank manager's pinched expression soured further when she saw him approaching with a child in his arms. "Sir, there's a bank policy against children behind the teller line," she said, not bothering to hide her disdain. Marcus shifted Elijah to his other arm. "I'm sorry, ma'am. My son is sick, and I couldn't find anyone to watch him. This will only take a minute." Patricia's lips thinned to a bloodless line. "What do you need?" Marcus reached into his jacket pocket with his free hand and pulled out a folded check. He placed it carefully on the desk and smoothed it flat with trembling fingers. "I need to deposit this, please." Patricia glanced at the check, then did a double take. Her eyes widened as she read the amount, $10 million. "Is this some kind of joke?" she asked, her voice rising. "No, ma'am," Marcus replied quietly, conscious of his sleeping son. "My late wife's cancer research was just purchased by a pharmaceutical company. This is the payment for her patent." Sarah had been a brilliant biochemist before cancer took her life, the cruel irony being that she'd been developing treatments for the very disease that killed her. In her final days, she'd made Marcus promise to finish what she started, to make sure her research reached the people who needed it. Patricia's eyes narrowed. She looked from the check to Marcus's worn work boots, his calloused hands, the faded jacket that had seen better days, and the child drooling slightly on his shoulder. "You expect me to believe that you, a construction worker, are the rightful recipient of $10 million? Her voice dripped with skepticism. "My wife was Dr. Sarah Jenkins. She worked at Meridian Laboratories. I have identification and all the paperwork from the patent attorney if you need to see it." Marcus reached for his back pocket, struggling to maintain his balance with Elijah in his arms. "That won't be necessary," Patricia said coldly. She picked up the check, examining it closely. "This doesn't look legitimate to me." Before Marcus could protest, she did the unthinkable. With deliberate slowness, she tore the check in half, then quarters, then eighths. "What are you doing?" Marcus gasped, his voice strangled. Elijah stirred against his shoulder. "Preventing fraud," Patricia replied, dropping the pieces into her wastebasket. "I suggest you leave before I call security." The commotion had drawn attention. Several customers watched the scene unfold, murmuring among themselves. A young teller behind the counter covered her mouth in shock. Marcus stood frozen, staring at the shredded remains of his future, of Elijah's future, in the trash. The money would have secured his son's education, paid for a house where Elijah could have his own room instead of sharing Marcus's studio apartment. It would have fulfilled his promise to Sarah that her work would help others. "You had no right," he whispered, his voice breaking. "That was real. That was everything." "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Patricia insisted, reaching for her phone. "Is there a problem here?" The deep voice came from behind Marcus. He turned to see an older man in an impeccable suit approaching the desk. His silver hair and commanding presence immediately changed the atmosphere. "Mr. Richardson," Patricia stammered, rising quickly from her seat. "I was just handling a situation with this gentleman. He tried to deposit a fraudulent check." Mr. Richardson, the bank's regional director who happened to be visiting that day, looked at Marcus and the sleeping child in his arms. "Sir," he said, addressing Marcus with a respect that Patricia had never shown, "may I ask your name?" "Marcus Jenkins." Recognition flickered in Mr. Richardson's eyes. "Dr. Sarah Jenkins' husband?" Marcus nodded, surprised. "My wife was on the board at Meridian Laboratories," Mr. Richardson explained. "She spoke highly of Dr. Jenkins' work. I was deeply sorry to hear of her passing." He turned to Patricia. "What was the amount of the check?" $10 million, Patricia replied defensively. "Obviously fake. And where is this check now?" Patricia gestured to her wastebasket. Mr. Richardson's face darkened as he understood what had happened. "Patricia, in my office. Now." His voice was quiet but carried an unmistakable authority. He turned back to Marcus. "Sir, please accept my deepest apologies for this inexcusable incident. If you'll allow me, I'd like to make this right." What followed was a whirlwind. Mr. Richardson personally called the pharmaceutical company to explain the situation. They agreed to issue a new check immediately. While they waited, he arranged for a private room where Marcus could lay Elijah on a comfortable couch to sleep. He ordered lunch for them both and insisted that Marcus tell him about Sarah and her research. "She was brilliant," Marcus said, his eyes fixed on his sleeping son. "She knew she wouldn't live to see her work completed, but she made me promise it would help others. This money, it's not just about us. Half of it is going to a foundation in her name to fund research for young scientists." Mr. Richardson nodded thoughtfully. "Your wife's work will save countless lives. And Patricia's actions today are completely unacceptable. I want you to know she's being terminated effective immediately." Marcus shook his head. "I don't want anyone to lose their job because of me." "It's not because of you," Mr. Richardson assured him. "It's because of her own prejudice and poor judgment. This bank cannot employ someone who would treat any customer that way, let alone someone in your position." By late afternoon, a courier arrived with a new check. Mr. Richardson personally oversaw the deposit into a new account he had set up for Marcus, one with special benefits and no fees. As Marcus prepared to leave with a still drowsy Elijah, Mr. Richardson handed him his business card. "If you ever need anything at all, please call me directly. And Marcus," he added, "Sarah would be proud of you. Taking care of your son, honoring her legacy, that takes real strength." Marcus felt tears threatening. "Thank you," he managed to say. "For everything." 6 months later, Marcus stood at the podium in the newly dedicated Sarah Jenkins Research Wing at Meridian Laboratories. Elijah, healthy and growing, sat in the front row beside Mr. Richardson and his wife, who had become something like grandparents to the boy. "My wife believed that science should serve humanity," Marcus told the assembled crowd of researchers, donors, and media. "She believed that knowledge was meant to be shared, not hoarded. And she believed that even in our darkest moments, we have a choice, to become bitter or to become better." He looked out at the faces watching him, faces of people who would carry Sarah's work forward, who would transform her research into treatments that would save lives. Today, we choose better. Today, we honor not just Sarah's brilliant mind, but her compassionate heart. And we recognize that sometimes, our greatest contributions to this world come not from what we achieve ourselves, but from what we enable others to achieve. After the ceremony, as guests mingled at the reception, Marcus found himself face to face with a familiar figure, Patricia Winters. She looked different now, humbled, without the arrogance she had worn like armor. "Mr. Jenkins," she said quietly. "I don't expect you to forgive me. But I wanted you to know that losing my job was the wake-up call I needed. I've been volunteering at a shelter for single parents. I'm trying to be better." Marcus studied her for a moment. "Sarah always said that people deserve second chances. She'd want me to forgive you." He extended his hand. "So I do." Patricia's eyes filled with tears as she shook his hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Later that evening, as Marcus tucked Elijah into bed in their new home, a modest but comfortable house with a backyard where Elijah could play, his son asked a question that caught him off guard. "Daddy, are we rich now?" Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, considering how to answer. "We have enough," he said finally. "Enough to be comfortable, enough to help others, enough to make sure Mom's work continues. But the real wealth isn't in our bank account, buddy." "Where is it?" Elijah asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. Marcus tapped his son's chest gently. "It's in here. In how we treat people. In the difference we make. That's what Mom believed, and that's the richest legacy she could have left us." As Elijah drifted off to sleep, Marcus stood by the window, looking up at the stars. He could almost feel Sarah beside him, her hand in his, her voice in his heart. "We're doing it, Sarah," he whispered. "We're keeping our promise." And somewhere in the vast universe, he felt certain she heard him. The story of Marcus Jenkins and his $10 million check might have ended very differently if not for one person who chose to see beyond appearances, who chose to say, "Sir," with respect rather than suspicion. It reminds us that dignity costs nothing to give but can be priceless to receive. In a world that often judges too quickly, sometimes the most revolutionary act is simple human decency. And sometimes, a single moment of kindness can change not just one life, but countless others. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more powerful true stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Remember, in a world where you can be anything, be kind, because you never know when you might be standing before someone whose life is about to change forever.